Hello and welcome to today's video about Windbound by 5 Live Studios. It's a seafaring exploration game which is heavily inspired by at least 2 Legend of Zelda games. And in Windbound you're challenged to craft, explore, and survive your way through many different islands as you find keys and open portals to the next set of islands. However, Windbound isn't being that well received right now by critics, so I thought we could explore why that is, and also talk about some things I liked about Windbound. And then, at the end of the video, I'll treat you to some unedited, uninterrupted gameplay so you can get a better idea of what Windbound actually is and how it looks while it plays. But before we get started, it's worth saying that I love talking about video games and you love hearing about them, so why don't you subscribe to this channel so we can both continue doing what we love. Alright, with all that out of the way, let's get started and talk about why Windbound is getting such harsh reviews right now. As a game that is heavily based on exploration, Windbound unfortunately doesn't give the player a lot to explore. Throughout the game, you're going to find yourself traveling between many different islands, but there's only really 3 types of islands that you'll find yourself on. The one that has the key to the portal, the one that has the portal, and then random islands that just have some resources on them. Of course, there's diversity with the flora and fauna on some of these islands, but ultimately there's nothing really beyond that. Beyond finding the key and the portal, you're really just moving from island to island to gather resources. In a game like Windbound, where you're given nothing but a boat and the wind at your back, of course you want to explore more, but when there's no payoff to that exploration, it's going to become a problem. So moving on from the exploration being a bit lacking, let's talk about the controls of Windbound, which are, to say the least, a little clunky. Moving the character around feels fine and the platforming is even passable, but where Windbound really struggles is its combat. In certain fights, I really didn't feel as though I had the right command I needed over my character to fight these beasts, and ultimately I didn't do too well in combat. It's actually what led me to my worst defeat in the game, but we'll get to that much later. It could also be that I'm just not that good at fighting in Windbound. That could also be a possibility, but I did feel a bit hindered by the controls, to say the least. And finally, Windbound suffers from a lot of redundancy. Each chapter goes about the same. You find 3 keys, you go to the portal, and then you go to the next chapter. And given that the exploration doesn't vary very often in Windbound, I can see how that could become a huge issue. Now that we've got all the negative stuff out of the way, let's talk about what I liked about Windbound. These are things that I enjoyed about Windbound and I think really bring out the best of the game. One thing I really enjoyed about Windbound was the crafting. It's a very important part of the game. You'll need it to progress, and I enjoyed how when I found new resources, I also was given new recipes. When I found a tree I couldn't cut down, the game said, here's how to make an axe, you'll have to find some things, but here it is. I enjoyed that ebb and flow, and how I was delivered new objectives when new hurdles came my way, and Windbound really knew how to give you that feedback, like, hey, you can make progress if you just craft this other thing. And before you know it, you're just crafting all sorts of items, and that process felt really nice, and it made me feel as though I was actually getting somewhere in the game. That's when I felt progress. Not when I was exploring, but when I was crafting things. And one of the most important things you'll craft in Windbound is your boat. And that is the second point that I liked about this game, the sailing. And this is very important because you're going to be on a boat most of the time that you spend playing Windbound. Rather than staying in one direction at all times, the wind moves constantly as it does in real life. And in Windbound, you have to adjust to that almost immediately to keep your boat moving at full speed. And this was really good. This kept me very engaged in sailing, and it made me actually sit and focus on that while also enjoying the scenery of the game, which, by the way, is very gorgeous. With the boat as the main event of Windbound, crafting has an even bigger role since you'll be upgrading your boat and even building bigger and better boats as you move forward. And this made me realize that 5 Live Studios probably spent the most time on the boats and the crafting in Windbound, which makes sense. It is on the cover of the game after all. And finally, let's talk about the game's difficulties and why you need to pay attention to them before you play Windbound. By default, the difficulty is set to Survivalist, which means that when you die, only the items you had on your character will stay with you. Nothing in your pouch and nothing on your boat. You'll also lose your boat. And what's worse, your game progress resets back to chapter 1 when you die. I only learned this after fighting a very big boar-like creature, and I was not happy, and the wind was removed from my proverbial sails. Avoid my mistake and play on Storyteller as your first playthrough. In Storyteller, when you die, you start from the chapter you're on. not from chapter 1, which is much better. And you'll also learn how to play the game under more forgiving circumstances. Your hunger won't increase and your stamina won't decrease as fast as they do on Survivalist, which means you get to learn the game at a much more welcoming pace. And of course, if you really like the game as you play it, then you can go back and play Survivalist and do what I would consider is the hard mode version of the game. And that's about all I wanted to say about Windbound. It is an interesting game, but I do see where it could have improved. I kind of hope that happens. You know, No Man's Sky had a second chance at life. Maybe Windbound will get more things as time goes on. But anyway, if you like this video, do me a favor and like the video. That always lets me know that you like the video. It's a great way to do so. If you want to talk about Windbound or any other games that you think I should cover on this channel, do me a favor and leave a comment. I love talking to you guys about video games, so any chance to do that, I very much welcome. And before you go and enjoy that uninterrupted, unedited gameplay of Windbound, do me a favor and subscribe to this channel if you like what I'm doing, because that's a great way to let me know that I should keep on doing it. But ultimately, thank you very much for spending your time with me today. I hope you enjoy this gameplay, and let me know if you pick up Windbound. I think it's alright. It just has a few kinks to work out.